Hey, it's Mike from the Run Testers. In this video, we're going to be talking about the brand new Polar Vantage M2. Now, this is Polar's kind of mid-range sports watch, so sits below the Vantage V, V2 and the Grit X. It's a successor to the Vantage M, which launched in 2018, so it's kind of maybe been due an upgrade. So myself, Nick and Kieran have all had one of these. Myself and Nick are going to talk about our experiences. We're going to save Kieran for the full review. So I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit about what's new, and then we're going to get into what it's like to run with. So yeah, here's our take on the Polar Vantage M2. So what is actually new on the Vantage M2 that you didn't get on the Vantage M? So there are some kind of similarities. We'll start with the design. It's the same size case. You've got the same resolution and size screen. The same in terms of the button kind of layouts that you're getting here as well. Now, what Polar's tried to do here is try to push into a kind of more stylish, fashionable kind of look for their range. So it's introducing these kind of two-tone straps. It's got this new kind of textured bezel on some of its options that it's available in. So the idea is that it's a sports watch you can wear and actually looks kind of nice to wear when you're not kind of tracking your running. So those are main things. You've got the same sensor technology, same sensors in terms of what you got on the Vantage M. It's really all about what's new on the software front and what it's taken from other watches that already have those software features. Now, in terms of new features and how it kind of compares to the Vantage M, you've got those new colours, the new kind of look bands, and that kind of more textured bezel. Now, in terms of the software, it's really about bringing more smartwatch type features and some of the kind of more interesting features that made it onto the Grit X and the Vantage V2. So in terms of smartwatch features, you're getting music controls, weather updates, and the kind of watch face customization. There's some training features, so the weekly training summary, the weekly summary of energy nutrients, and a big one is FuelWise. So that's the smart fueling assistant that really can help you when you're going out and running for longer and really better understand how to fuel your runs and when to fuel during your runs. So in terms of the kind of running related features that are retained from the Vantage M, you're still getting the same heart rate sensor. You're getting all the kind of rich sleep metrics and monitoring features like nightly recharge. You're getting your running index, running programs. You've got Training Load Pro, training benefit insights, a multitude of kind of sports profiles, and you are getting FitSpark, which gives you those kind of recommended workouts based on kind of your recovery and the trainings that you've done. So still a feature-packed watch, and a lot of the good stuff that was on the Vantage M has made its into the M2 as well. So one feature that doesn't make the cut from the Vantage V2 and the Grit X is the breadcrumb style navigation. So you do get a simpler back to the start feature, but ultimately if you want to upload maps and follow those routes in a kind of really simple way, that isn't a feature that's currently supported on the Vantage M2. So in terms of battery life, you are seeing some kind of improvements there. Now you're getting the same 30 hours of GPS battery life as the Vantage M. You've gone from 5 days to 7 days in watch mode for the M2 as well. And you're also getting the power save mode, which in theory will get you up to 100 hours of continuous training, just with less accuracy than being in the full GPS mode. So I've just done my first run with the Vantage M2. I ran with the Garmin Enduro and the Garmin HRM Pro chest strap as well. I did 10 miles, which came up 10:06 on the Enduro, 10:04 on the M2. Average pace kind of was a couple of seconds out, so not too bad. Heart rate, the average heart rate against the chest strap was identical. The max heart rate, unfortunately, was kind of noticeably higher, enough to kind of put you in a different heart rate zone. Battery wise, there was about 8 or 9% drop off, whereas the Enduro was kind of 2%. It's kind of an hour 30 of running. And yeah, comfort wise and kind of screen wise, you know, not that different from the Vantage M, kind of other Vantage series watches. So yeah, the design changes didn't really make a major difference to me out running. Generally comfortable, no major issues. So yeah, that was my kind of first run take on the M2. Pretty solid, to be honest. No major issues for me. Obviously, apart from that kind of high heart rate, max heart rate data.
So I did my first run with the Polar Vantage M2 today, which is an hour, kind of easy to steady in the forest, nothing too dramatic. I was comparing it against my Apple Watch, which sounds odd, but Apple Watch in all my recent testing, including on a route that I've measured with a wheel and everything, is the most accurate watch for GPS at the moment for me. So that's why I was using it to test it. And I also had a Garmin HRM Pro chest strap on linked to the Apple Watch to test out the M2's heart rate on the run. Start the run, took a while to get a GPS lock. I'd hope that'd be quicker in the future, but nothing too dramatic there. And overall GPS distance was pretty good, pretty close to the Apple Watch. Like I was in the forest, under tree cover, a few sharp turns. The Polar read a little long, which tends to be what I see with Polar watches in general actually. It tends to be slightly generous in terms of distance covered, but nothing too dramatic, kind of within the margin of error. This wasn't really the case of heart rate. It had a terrible time on heart rate. It consistently read low, but also spiked too high. So both my average heart rate and my max heart rate were wrong on the watch. I'll give it a few more runs to see if that was just an aberration, and hopefully it'll be better in the future. But it feels like it's likely to end up that I recommend linking a chest strap to the watch, just because you do get some nifty features from it based on your heart rate. Obviously the kind of cardio load training stuff is there, but also the new fuel wise stuff, which is a really good addition. At the end of a run, you're given a breakdown of kind of, you know, how many calories you've burnt and what your energy sources were. If you're working in kind of higher heart rate zones, it's going to be more carbs than fat, and in lower heart rate zones, vice versa. It's a really good feature, one of the key new features on the watch, so you are going to want accurate heart rate data, and so far this didn't happen for me. Battery life has been really good for me. It feels like there's been quite a big discrepancy between the run testers so far in terms of battery life used. I took it off the charger 100% last night, didn't run with it till today. It was still at kind of 100%, only knocked 2% off on the run, and now this evening I'm still at 96%. All very positive on that side so far. The Vantage M2 enters a kind of really interesting and good bracket of watches, basically the kind of based on RRP. The big competition is obviously the Garmin Forerunner 245. It's slightly cheaper than the Vantage M without music and slightly more expensive with it. Coros Apex is also around that price range, and there's always the Coros Pace 2 for 180, which is just a fantastic tracker in my opinion. It's really interesting to me that Polar's gone for fuel wise as the feature they've brought down from the pricier watches to the M2, and I think it's a cool idea. I think fuel wise was my favorite new kind of feature added to any watches in 2020. I think it's a really nifty idea. Helps a lot of obviously really long distance athletes, you know Ironmen or ultramarathoners, long cycle, people who cycle long way. Really good idea to get your nutrition breakdown, but I do think this is something that marathoners in particular can learn a lot from. I see a lot of even experienced runners getting it wrong and seeing it, really clearly broken down that you've used this amount of carbs, you've burnt this amount of calories from carbs and this from fat, can really help you fine tune your nutrition, as well as obviously getting the alerts during a marathon or during a long training run. Whether that's enough to really set the M2 out in this price bracket is going to be difficult. It doesn't seem to have navigation. It does have back to start, which is really helpful, obviously, in an emergency, just send you back to where you start if you are lost. But there is navigation on the Garmin Forerunner 245 and the Coros Apex. You are getting breadcrumb navigation with those watches. So that's one area it falls down a little bit. Obviously, there's music on the 245 music as well. But you are getting on the Vantage M is Polar's cardio load tool. It's a really good training analysis tool. I think it probably in this range, it's a little bit more detailed than what you're getting from Garmin. The Forerunner 245's training status is good. It gives you the overall snapshot of your training load and whether it's proven productive. There's more to dive in on Polar's cardio load. It's kind of more representative of what you're getting on premium watches. So that's nice to have on the M2. That does help it stand out as well. I do like the new training load for the week feature. The watch face you get for that, I really like that on the V2. I really like it on the M2. I do think weathers though is obviously a useful addition. If it's the main watch you're wearing all the time, I always find it handy to have weather on your wrist. So early verdict is M2 is good. It's a really solid all-round sports tracker. You're getting good training analysis for this price point. Fuel-wise is a good, interesting feature that stands out in this price bracket as well. It's not missing too much. Maybe breadcrumb navigation is obviously the thing that probably isn't there that a lot of people might want from a watch around this price. But you are getting back to start, which will help in terms of not getting lost. So do a lot more testing. But yeah, overall. Early verdict is, I think the M2 is going to be a solid addition to this kind of price range and one that offers something a little bit different in terms of the fuel-wise stuff you're getting here.
So my initial thoughts on the Polar Vantage M2 is that on that one run it was, you know, kind of generally pretty solid. Now obviously it didn't really kind of deliver on the heart rate. It's kind of what I've seen on Polar watches in general, and I would turn to using a chest strap monitor, especially if you're kind of delving into those kind of heart rate based kind of training features. In terms of what's changed in the design, I don't think it makes a major difference in terms of kind of when you're out running with it. It might look a little nice on your wrist when it's not. I don't mind the kind of new bezel on it, and I think the strap, the two-tone strap's quite nice as well. Again, not a major kind of deal breaker really there for me. In comparison to things that are around this price, so things like the 245 without music, so the Garmin Forerunner 245, and also the Coros Apex and not the Apex Pro. You're getting, I think, kind of a very similar kind of performance there. You're not getting those kind of breadcrumb trail and navigation kind of support. You're getting that back to start feature, but that's about it. But everything else kind of feels very familiar. So it's really, I think, set on things like fuel wise, which you don't get on those watches, which is a really interesting feature and good to see on the M2. And maybe the kind of, you know, if you're very particular about the design when you're not running with it. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts on the M2. Solid so far, not perfect, but it's one that I'm looking forward to running with a lot more. So there you have it. That is our initial run thoughts on the Polar Vantage M2. As I said, Kieran will be involved in the kind of full review video, but if you've got any questions, things you'd like us to take a look at, compare the watch to kind of as we continue our testing, let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our new videos. And yeah, we'll see you for the next Run Testers video.